success, not being either West or East Coast based. We have, hard to believe for some people out there, but we use very highly skilled engineers, and a lot of them have backgrounds in artificial intelligence, machine learning technologies, and we have a strong talent pool in Minnesota with all the universities that we have there. And I have a wait list of about 30 people waiting to take jobs, which is almost unheard of if you think about the folks that compete with Google, Apple, all of those folks on the West or East Coast. So we've had a lot of really good luck with not being in a traditional place. So we'll talk about that later on some of the panel questions.
Hi everyone, my name is Karen Carponi. I have my own consulting company. I'm also an ambassador for the Global Citizen Forum, so I'd like to thank the founder for letting us host this panel here. And I guess I would say I really enjoy consulting or guiding conscious companies on their journey of really turning their visions into reality. And I've had the fortune of working with Aecon and helping them with the solar energy projects in Africa. I also launched the first eco-friendly headphone company with the Bob Marley family. And so that's what I'm passionate about, and I'm here to provoke and to try and experiment and do new projects.
My name is Pradeep Madan. I'm one of the 3 partners at a firm called Great North Labs, which is a venture capital firm based in Minneapolis. Our catchment, our target region is the upper Midwest, which comprises from Ohio west to the Dakotas and from Canada south until roughly Colorado. But that doesn't necessarily limit us in investing elsewhere as well. We're all technologists, and we invest in tech-enabled enterprises only.
Hi everyone, my name is Maria Deaton, and I am a social entrepreneur and impact investor. And I've always definitely believed that innovation in its purest form comes from the grassroots, and that's something that I've worked on for probably about 15 years in terms of working with mostly civil society organizations, public-private partnerships to kind of drive social change in various aspects of the SDGs. So I'm really excited to be here today and can hopefully go in more depth. So.
Thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Patty Simmons. I'm a physician, so all of this is a little beyond me. Don't make me go into that site where we have to ask questions. My professional career has been at the Mayo Clinic, where we see about 1.5 million people from every state, every country of the world. We're a global enterprise. At Mayo, I had the opportunity to be in a leadership role on a number of things that really challenged me and made me excited about doing things beyond traditional medicine. I was the chair of the board of our branch at Mayo that creates businesses out of our intellectual property. I oversaw international humanitarian work and charity care, and a variety of things, health policy, government relations. It made me see I needed to go beyond my walls and meet very different things than I was doing if I wanted to bring to scope what I considered the extraordinary, excellent healthcare of Mayo Clinic. So one of the things I'm doing now is helping bring the World Expo back to the United States, back to Minnesota, which is the epicenter of health and healthcare in America. And doing that, we can convene groups. Excuse me, here, we'll twist a little bit.
Okay, if you can't see it up at the top, that code is 185578. And then if you just respond to the question, what do you want to learn from this session? Your responses are going to inform and guide our panelists as they respond to the questions. We have one.
Good job. You get a prize. See, they're doing good. It just, this is a new skill. You have a new skill. If you can't figure that out, we've got wine and beer. You can have a glass of wine or a beer, if that helps. You would, good job. Good job. We need someone to cheers with. So if you just joined us, there's beer and wine as well.
So the first three that have, the
And
first three
there's
that
seats
have,
up here, so feel free to
Yeah,
Yeah,
come
fill
come
on.
on in. Yeah, move up. Join us.
We get lonely up here.
Come on. Come on in, Yadri.
so the first few items.
Come on.
Welcome.
Okay, we'll join you guys for a little bit.
Thank you. So the first few that have come in, again, just to inform and direct our panelists as they respond to some more questions. What is Pink Lion AI focused on? Activating entrepreneurship and innovation. And healthcare and the humanitarian sector. Okay.
Oh, you got a new one.
Oh, Pink Lion AI future directions.
Go back. You can wait.
Here we go. Okay. So, for the first question of the evening, I'd like to start with Patty.
Okay. Thank you.
Patty, why does Minnesota want to host a World's Fair that is, in 21st century lingo, a World Expo?
Okay, oh, I'd love to answer that question because I've been pondering it a lot. I got drawn into this because I believe in the answer. As a physician, I had the joy of taking care of one at a time, and then in my leadership roles at Mayo, expanding that and expanding that and expanding that. But you hit a limit in humanitarian care, in charity care, even with our current digital tools. You never can scope to give the highest quality care that you want to more and more people. So it's become important clearly to me that we won't solve this in healthcare, in medicine. We won't solve it in the government. I did health policy for quite a while. And we won't solve it even with just the best and brightest people doing innovative things in artificial intelligence. We need to bring in people from more sectors. And the excitement is you bring in artists, musicians, humanitarians, bring in the United Nations, because our expo will be the first expo that focuses on a sustainable development goal, and that is number 3, health and well-being for all. Our theme, not coincidentally, is healthy people, healthy planet. Because again, indelibly linked are the health of ourselves, our families, society, and our planet. So we want to bring those together. Minnesota is the place to do it. Now, why Minnesota? Well, the Mayo brothers, when they built the most famous medical center in the world, the best in the United States, came to a cornfield in Minnesota and made it happen there. Now that was 150 plus years ago, but they weren't afraid to go off-road. They did things no one had done in healthcare before. They integrated care around the patient. That was novel. It still is novel to many places. They integrated the medical records so it was the patient, not the institution, in terms of the data. So that was accessible. So they were tremendously innovative and created partnerships and believed in the world. The Mayo brothers traveled all over the world to learn new techniques gathered from all over the globe. Not coincidentally, patients come from all over the globe. So there's a constant infusion and dialogue, and that we want to perpetuate and scale. So if we have an expo in Minnesota, what does Minnesota bring to that? One thing is this extraordinary creative sector we have with with digital work and AI. Another is what Minnesota is in terms of the people. We have an unusual situation for a small state. We have the most Fortune 500 companies for our size of any place in the world. We have the strongest history of philanthropy, the strongest tradition of philanthropy. We give in Minnesota per capita more than any place else in America. And one of the things I think really tells you about Minnesota is we passed a law, a constitutional amendment, to tax ourselves to support taking care of the environment and taking care of culture. So it's a really terrific place where these sectors come together, and I think we get by with a lot because nobody's looking. But it's probably time for people to look, and with an expo, we can bring the world to our stage. We can bring 14 million of the public, because even convening these incredible meetings like here in Davos, it's us, people who are trying to be change makers, trying to make things happen. We need people too. I want 14 million people to come and experience and teach and grow and take, not just look and learn.
Can I add the investor point of view?
Absolutely. I was just going to say, I would like for this to be a little bit more interactive, so if you want some input or you have some input on any other response to a question, please feel free to chime in.
So, complementing what you said, in addition to the Mayo Clinic, Medtronic is a company based in Minnesota. Its history, it is the world leader in pacemakers. And its history is a young technologist who decided that he wanted to innovate sort of in this space, and over the decades has built a company into the world leader in pacemakers. And we'll talk about it perhaps later as well. This is a kind of innovation which, as it creates value, it creates more entrepreneurs who can benefit from that value creation and participate in the ecosystem. Minnesota is well known for what's called Medical Alley, like Silicon Valley, and in excess of 300 startups are focused on devices, therapies, and various health-related innovations. And preventive health, of course, is kind of the theme that you're talking about, and that has become of greater importance than ever.
Can I'm gonna add on to the innovation. So I'm gonna take you guys off-road from Minnesota to Africa. And one of the things that we did is we dropped a container into Uganda, and we decked it out into a 3D printing lab. And so it was an experiment, and it was a pilot, because we wanted to see what if this technology ends up in the hands of people who are less fortunate. They may not be educated, they may not even know how to read or write. And we had the kids clean up all the plastic bottles, and we watched them put them through the shredder, and then the bottles were shredded, and then they put them in the next machine, and they melted them down and turned it into coil, and then they put it in the next machine, and we were like, well, what do you guys want? And they didn't really understand what we were saying, because they had never even seen the 3D printers before, right? And so the kids were playing, and they were like, well, we want a toy car. And so I was like, okay, we'll make one. And so that was the first thing we made, and these kids were just, it was amazing. They were scratching their heads, they were looking at it. They just couldn't believe they put a bottle in one machine, and they got a toy car in the other one. And it was really neat because they started brainstorming. They were like, well, can we make a toilet seat? And it's like things that we may take for granted. They were sparked by inspiration, and they were coming up with things that they could then build in their communities. And it was great because, you know, they used up the plastics, they came together as a community, and they took ownership of it. And so, so sometimes you can see technology, you know, we may have it, but when you put it in an unexpected place, it's interesting to see what the outcome is. Anyone else want to add to that? No?
Thank you very much. Next question is from Maria. Maria, your background is quite varied. Can you give us some examples of off-road innovation that you've experienced or led internationally?
Yes, so to give you a little bit more background, so I started a company about 10 years ago that works with local videographers around the world. So we have a network of about 5,000 semi-professional to professional videographers that can produce at an international scale. And then we have about 20,000 citizen journalists and influencers that we work with, and we have a platform that's integrated into pretty much all of the large media outlets, CNN, BBC, Deutsche Welle, Russia, China, basically all over the world, over 250. So when we first started, there was a lot of sort of preconceived notions about who could tell their own story, basically. So when you would go to like a VC firm in Silicon Valley, they would say, why does a local Iraqi have to tell their story? Why can't you use, the networks that already exist, like AFP or any of the wire services? So I think when you're working in innovation and you're challenging some of these models, in particular advocating for, the local perspective, whether it's like one of innovation or one of just, in this case, media or their own sort of desire to talk about what's happening within their environment, I think keeping in mind, one, the obstacles that can stand in the way of that, but also, what is the enabling environment that is required to sort of help these people, come to the point where they can, in a sense, advocate for themselves, which is what we were trying to do. And the example that comes to mind is in Syria. After we had been around for a number of years, we had quite a large grant to work with Syrian journalists, and we were told by pretty much everyone in the Middle East that because of the difficulty, Syria had been in sort of a black hole for decades. They had no press. Like basically they were so far behind that you should just work with the Lebanese or work with the Iraqis or work with in environments where they had more of like a basic media sector. And we were like, no, we're going to work in Syria. So we did, and we sort of built this network. And then as the civil war basically began in the region, what ended up happening is all of those outlets started coming to us for those Syrian stories. So it was a really important learning lesson, I think, for me and even like the founding team, in that like we knew we were starting the company from like a core value of like locally led storytelling, and it ended up validating, like I don't think we could have raised our second 2 rounds of capital if we didn't have a demonstrated case from Syria of the possibility of, and basically proving the model that it could work from the ground. So, and then a very specific example, you guys might remember 5 or 6 years ago, there started to be more and more in the media explorations of gender in the Syrian war. So all about like ISIS and women under ISIS and all this stuff. And that started with a woman that we had trained, and she took the first undercover video in Raqqa when ISIS invaded Raqqa. And she kind of created an entire genre of like behind the scenes kind of ISIS footage. And her footage was licensed 110 times. And there's only 200 plus outlets in the world. So basically you have like a 20-year-old Syrian female with, a new genre of citizen journalism that's being seen by, we calculated, almost 4 billion people in terms of impressions around the world, because it was just playing on loops in China and everything else. So what was really interesting about that is that so she made about $100,000 and we made, we made 30. So we do about a 70-30 split with the way that we broker our content. But what's really powerful about that is, again, you have a young Syrian female influencing a narrative about a war, which is very, obviously, not what stakeholders on the ground were wanting at that time. They really weren't interested in having a conversation about gender. So that was also, I think, a learning lesson for us in terms of what is possible when you empower people, especially the unlikely person, the female Syrian journalist that doesn't speak English, has no established media sector, basically has every obstacle, no internet, at that point, barely electricity. And then you have someone who's able to change a narrative about a war with a lot of foreign interests, a lot of money, trillions of dollars of interest. So, that's right.
Thank you. It's a really interesting viewpoint. Thank you very much.
Do you guys want to come sit?
There's seats up here. You look like people we would like. Come on.
And grab a glass of wine on the way out.
Yeah.
Did you want me to grab you one?
Yeah. Was it that obvious?
All right, I'd like to direct the next question to Karen. How important are strategic partnerships to accelerate innovation, and what do you look for in a strategic partner?
Yeah, I think strategic partners are really important, and I'm going to give 2 examples of that, because I think with the right partner, first of all, I think aligning the right values, right? Each partner has to bring a different skill set to the table, but beyond that, aligning the company values, but also aligning the values of the senior team, right? The leaders of both companies, and if their personal are also aligned, I just feel like the partnership has more room for longevity, and to last a longer time and to have a greater impact. And I'm going to give 2 examples, and one is going to be, I have my friend Yasmin is here, and so we partnered our companies, and we ended up bringing 30 teenagers from about 15 different countries, 11 in Africa, and with the partnership, we agreed that we wanted to empower the youth, we wanted to give them an opportunity. And together we brought 30 teenagers to a Tony Robbins Global Youth Leadership Summit in San Diego. And it was beautiful because some of these kids had never even been on a plane before, and they were traveling all the way to the United States, and now it's just amazing. One of them got into Harvard. And it's been amazing. One of the girls, she went back and she was like, that's it, she started producing her own music. She sold her CDs, and she wrote a proposal to the government in Benin, and she asked them for a grant to plant trees because she wanted the women in her village to be able to make jam and to plant fruit trees and to be able to sell that fruit. And now she's planted over 2,000 trees in her village in Benin, and that was just out of inspiration and being empowered and having the opportunity to travel and go to this empowerment youth summit, which had 500 teenagers from over 30 countries, or from over 50 countries actually. So that was one, but the other one that I want to talk about, which I think is really important, I worked with Aecon in solar energy, and we had a partner in China, so we would get the solar streetlights from a company in China, and we had a whole model. We expanded in about 15 countries in Africa, and coming from consumer electronics, I knew that I wanted to have several different suppliers. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So I went on a hunt for new technology, and I found a company in the south of France that also sold the streetlights, but they had a different technology, and I just really loved what he was about, and I brought the team there, and I realized their assembly plant was like IKEA. It was like, I walked in there and I was like, this isn't like what I experienced in China. I'm like, your factory is great. I feel like I can fold all this up myself, and we had no intention to put the first solar streetlight assembly plant in Africa, but after we saw his technology from the production all the way to the final product, we basically shipped his module to West Africa, and we put the first solar streetlight assembly plant there, which then created jobs, and we were able to source, make the streetlights for the local market. So I think, finding the right strategic partners, you can really amplify and do new creative things, and it's amazing to see how that works.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
Pradeep, I have a multifaceted question for you. For the first part, in going off-road, in relation to entrepreneurs, capital, corporate partners, and public policy, what do VCs do to maximize outcomes for the LPs and entrepreneurs?
Capital is only a small part of the overall value that VCs look to add. In the end, of course, it's essential, but it's not sufficient. So, as you spoke about public-private partnerships, VCs look kind of very diligently and systematically for ensuring an ecosystem that delivers all the different dimensions to make entrepreneurs successful. So, we look for relationships with universities for talent. We look for sponsorships from the state authorities, the government, to enable policy. We look for kind of mentors in the industry, in the ecosystem, who can help the entrepreneurs. And of course, we provide the capital, but also our capital is never enough. Entrepreneurs are, particularly the ones who succeed and need to scale up, their appetite for capital is immense. And so having a partner ecosystem that can connect the entrepreneurs once we've done our investment to sources of additional investment and follow-on investment as the companies evolve is critical. So we work on all of that.
Yeah.
Could you go into a bit about this is still for Pradeep, a bit about the successes and challenges that you've experienced, maybe how you've overcome them, and then what does your long-range planning look like?
So just by way of history, we're a relatively young fund. We're approximately 2 years old. So in that context, the challenges, so the successes that we've seen, we're quite surprised. And this again sort of speaks to the fact that the world is becoming flatter and flatter. It's not, deal flow is not only happening in Silicon Valley. In the upper Midwest, the region that I described earlier, we've seen in excess of 1,000 opportunities in the course of a year. So that means roughly 300 deals a day. I'm sorry, 3 deals a day, excuse me. That's, from that, we've actually, ourselves, we've invested in 20 deals, but there's plenty for our partner investor firms to participate in as well. So that's worked out pretty well. Our ability to raise money has also kind of surprised us. What that means is, we've been able to raise the fund as a new fund in a relatively short period of time. You might think, well, Silicon Valley is where all the branded VC firms are. 40% of all capital goes to Silicon Valley. So why would somebody be investing in off-road capital, so to speak? It turns out there is social affinity for helping among successful LPs who made money to invest in themes or in regions that support their region. And that's exactly what has happened for us. Our roughly 100 LPs are substantially from, I would say, entirely region. So all that's worked very nicely. What hasn't worked, or the work that I should say is ahead for us, raise capital, gained kind of good traction with partnerships. The work ahead really is the work of value creation with the entrepreneurs. We are entrepreneurs ourselves. I've built 300 products in my career. It turns out, as much as we talk about the excitement of entrepreneurship is very difficult. It's very, very tough. And what gets entrepreneurs through at the end of the day, I'd say the cap table. The cap table is an extraordinary innovation because it motivates people to see the blue sky and say, this can really become something big, and motivates me. That's not the only thing. Entrepreneurs are motivated by a lot of things, but that is what basically overcomes the adversity of an entrepreneur that they have to tunnel through. And our goal, our task ahead, our challenge ahead, is to work with them, be side by side with them as they kind of traverse their journey.
I think Patty wanted to tag under that.